Shalom. This week's Torah portion is Parashat Ki Tavo, and it shall come to pass when you enter into the land. It's the seventh Torah portion in Sefer Dvarim, the book of Deuteronomy, beginning in chapter 26. As the portion begins, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses relates a beautiful vision of the future to this generation which is about to enter into the land. He gives over to them the annual commandment of bringing the bikurim, the first fruits of the year, the first fruits of the land, up to the holy temple, there to be presented to the officiating Kohen before the altar of Hashem, while the individual acknowledges and expresses his great thanks to the Almighty for all the good in his own personal life and in the life of the nation. After relating the details of the commandment and the ceremony of the bikurim, the Parsha describes the unique ceremony which the children of Israel were commanded to enact upon their entry into the land of Israel. The main component of this observance will be a renewal of the people's covenant with Hashem. The nation is instructed, upon entering the land, to build an altar upon Har Evel, Mount Ebal, and to bring offerings upon it, and afterwards to hold the assembly of Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal, wherein Israel would formalize and seal a covenant with Hashem regarding all these commandments in which they have been instructed since Parshat Re'eh. At the ceremony of this covenant, we are instructed that half the tribes of Israel shall stand on Mount Gerizim and half on Mount Ebal, with the tribe of Levi and the Ark of the Covenant between the mountains. Specific warnings for serious transgressions were to be made, and following this, blessings will be read, concise blessings that will befall the people if they keep and uphold the covenant and the commandments, and the longer list, curses which will be the result of not keeping the covenant. The experience of bringing the first fruits, which, by the way, is the exclusive privilege and responsibility of those living in the land of Israel. There are no first fruits outside the land, not in Dallas, not in Teaneck, or not in Golders Green. This is an act of almost indescribable joy. As the Holy Or HaChaim comments, there is no greater joy than living in Israel. But as we have learned, it's so much deeper than this bringing of the first fruits. It's an experience of gratitude and the recognition of God's hand in our lives from the time of the nation's inception until this very moment. Now, ostensibly, it would seem that our Torah portion this week is one of extreme, even diametric contrasts. On the one hand, the Parsha opens with this commandment of the bikurim, the first fruits. There's no greater expression of individual or national joy than that of bringing the first fruits to the Holy Temple. But, similar to the conclusion of the book of Leviticus in the portion of Bechukotai, although actually much different, but Parashat Ki Tavo features the curses that would befall Israel for not hearkening to the commandments, introduced in verse 15 of chapter 28. And it will be if you do not obey Hashem your God to fulfill all his commandments and statutes which I am commanding you this day, that all these curses will come upon you and overtake you. So is there like a nice way to put this? How do I explain this exactly? How do we understand this? How do we reconcile the immeasurable joy expressed by the bringing of the first fruits in the beginning of the Torah reading with the immeasurably painful, dreaded curses? So open up your hearts in the deepest way. Let's try to understand the joy, the blessing, and let's try to understand the curses. What's this really all about? What's the source of the overwhelming joy of bringing the first fruits up to the temple anyway? It's the experience and perception of true reality, unfettered and uncluttered by pretensions or masks. It's like, get it through your head. Hashem loves you. Look at the beauty in your life, the timing, the divine providence, yes, the intelligent design in your life. What life would be all the time if only it could be lived to the fullest. The Holy Temple experience. Moshe tells this generation about to go into the land, the Holy Temple experience will be the truth of how sweet life can be when we fully comprehend what ani l'dodi v'dodi li, the intimacy of our relationship with God, what it really means. It's also about community and commitment and recognition, thankfulness, and most of all, acknowledgement of Hashem in the life of the individual and in the life of the nation. And standing before God at the holiest place on earth, at the location of the altar, site of Adam's creation, the individual declares and confesses before God, everything I have is yours, and I'm alive, and my people exist, and you brought us to this land on account of your kindness. So the goal of the recital of this oral history, what's called the confession made by the pilgrim bearing the first fruits. The goal is to inspire us to always remain like a pilgrim, forever renewed and experiencing the wonder and newness of life, and to always be a part of the nation, to always see things brand new and experience the awe and wonder and appreciation and thankfulness of seeing what we have and what Hashem gives us, and closing the circle of thankfulness for the land of Israel, bringing positivity into the world, fixing the sin of the spies. Moshe is telling the people, by giving them this commandment, simply put, going up to the Holy Temple with your first fruits will reconnect you with God and will give you an insight into the most profound moment in a person's life, the greatest expression of joy and fulfillment, knowing my place and seeing the whole. So now that our hearts are open in the deepest way, about these curses. Okay, there are many interpretations and commentators that deal with analyzing and clarifying how many of these things literally and recognizably have already come to pass during various periods of Jewish history. But really, what are these unfathomable, unmentionable curses all about? You know, it's not his idea. It's not even from him. To whatever extent they have come true or could come true, they paint a portrait of concealment. The curses are the direct translation of the concealment of Hashem in our lives. And we caused that, not him. So I blame him. Why blame him? Perhaps we blame him because we can't take the responsibility of being accountable. Everything that we're just talking about, the beauty, the sweetness, the newness born of appreciation and acknowledgement. Now picture the opposite. The curses in this portion are the ultimate nightmare vision of vulnerability, the feelings of impotence, frustration, uselessness, of being manipulated, sold out, abused, of being at the mercy of malignant forces, of being isolated, being a prisoner in a world gone mad. Precisely because our rights to a normal life in this land is based on the covenant that we made at the time we entered. The realization of these curses, regarding which, by the way, please note, they are uttered in the singular, to the errant individual who separates himself from his brethren, but not to the nation, never to the nation. The realization of these curses is not caused by the actions of a vicious, vindictive God who is after us, but because we are Jews and we can't do it. We can't find ourselves, we can't find fulfillment, we can't fit into this world, we can't survive, and how much more so we can't flourish any other way than being plugged into the commandments. So what do we want from him? Now, after the commandment of the first fruits, the Parashat describes a most singular commandment. It goes like this. And Moses and the elders of Israel commanded the people, saying, observe the entire commandment that I command you this day, and it will be, on the day that you cross the Jordan to the land that Hashem your God is giving you, that you shall set up for yourselves huge stones and plaster them with lime. When you cross, you shall write upon them all the words of this Torah in order that you may come to the land which Hashem your God is giving you, a land flowing with milk and honey, as Hashem, God of your forefathers, has spoken to you. And it will be when you shall cross the Jordan that you shall set up these stones, regarding which I command you this day on Mount Ebal, and you shall plaster them with lime, and there you shall build an altar to Hashem your God, an altar of stones. You shall not wield any iron upon them. You shall build the altar of Hashem your God out of whole stones, and on it you shall offer up burnt offerings to Hashem your God, and you shall slaughter peace offerings, and you shall eat there, and you shall rejoice before Hashem your God. You shall write upon the stones all the words of this Torah, well explained, very clearly. So let's understand this. The very first thing that Israel, the nation, was told to do upon crossing the Jordan and entering the land that very day was to set up these huge monumental stones, to plaster them, and to write on them all the words of the Torah. This is their very first day in the land, immediately upon entering. That's one busy day. Why was Israel commanded on the day that the nation crossed the Jordan to travel all the way to Mount Ebal, quite a distance from the Jordan River, and in the heart of what was then enemy territory, to build an altar there, to write the words of the Torah on its stones, and to travel that very day to Gilgal? Now we also learn about this event in the book of Joshua, in some detail, in chapter 4. Joshua commanded that 12 stones be taken from the places of the feet of the Kohanim, the location where the Kohanim were standing from the Jordan, from the riverbed, that these stones should be brought into the nation's first stop in the land. Now, ostensibly, we would think that the purpose of these stones was to publicize the great miracles and to tell them over to future generations what transpired to Israel when she crossed the Jordan. Joshua also commanded that 12 other stones be placed in the river under the feet of the Kohanim, replacing those that were taken. And at the end of this section, we are told that Joshua placed these stones that were taken from the Jordan in Gilgal. But yet, in Joshua chapter 8, we are told that Joshua established the altar on Mount Ebal, as Moshe here commands, and he wrote the entire Torah on them. So our sages determine in their tradition that the stones of Mount Ebal and the stones of Gilgal are the very same. For the very day that Israel crossed the Jordan, they traveled all the way to Shechem, almost 20 miles, and established the altar on Mount Ebal. Then they disassembled it and brought the stones to Gilgal the same day. But now, not only were the words of the Torah written on these stones, but according to the understanding of our sages, based on the words, you shall inscribe on the stones all the words of this Torah, well clarified, or very, very explained, be'er hetev in Hebrew. Our sages teach that these words, well clarified, means that the words of the Torah were written in 70 languages. That is, all the spoken languages of the world. What is this all about? It's too amazing. These stones taken from the bottom of the Jordan River, plastered over, and then the Torah written on them in every language to be set up immediately upon crossing into the land. Thus we read, beginning in chapter 27, Moshe and the elders of Israel commanded the people, saying, observe the entire commandment that I command you this day. It shall be on the day that you cross the Jordan to the land that Hashem your God gives you. You shall set up great stones, and you shall coat them with plaster. You shall inscribe on them all the words of this Torah when you cross over, so that you may enter the land that Hashem your God gives you, a land flowing with milk and honey, as Hashem the God of your forefathers spoke about to you. This is so amazing. Stones which bore witness to the crossing of the Jewish people into the land, because they were there. They were taken from the bottom of the river and then erected as a monument on the very first day upon entering. The very first thing that this nation was commanded to do before settling in, before unpacking, was to erect these huge message boards with the words of the Torah inscribed on them, and what's more, well clarified, meaning in every language known to man. There was no Waze or Google Maps. We didn't find any road signs waiting for us. We had to create these signs. And then those very stones became the altar for Hashem's offerings. The Torah is teaching us something for all time here. This is not a history lesson. It's got to be an insight into something that we need now. Well, it's not just what was going on moving day, you know. First day in the new country. We all know how hectic that can be. Boxes marked living room and kitchen and Johnny's bedroom. But they remained unpacked while all of this was being done. So open up your hearts in deepest way. Write the words of the Torah on the stones so that all will know that for the sake of keeping the Torah, you have entered into the land. And this is your entire claim and right to this land. This is why was written in 70 languages, well clarified according to our sages. The Torah is our deed to this land. It's the foundation of why this land was given to us, and thus it was written in 70 languages so that the entire world and all its population should understand that only to Israel was this land given, and to none other. Israel's claim to this land is perpetually brought into doubt by so many, by world leaders, by biased media. It's always the same story. This issue somehow constantly remains contemporary, the issue of the people of Israel's right to this land, our true connection to this land, constantly questioned by the nations of the world. Unlike any other nation, Israel is constantly called upon to validate and justify and prove its right to exist in its own land. The world, the UN, the EU, and yes, America, is so troubled with our presence here. Some say we're occupiers, so how can you occupy your own land? That's a good question. And then this one wants an apology that we are still alive. And then these ones say that we need to be boycotted and destroyed and subdued. And then these ones, they're plotting to kill us. And then these are pointing thousands of missiles at us at this very moment. And then these ones are setting fire to our land. And then these ones mount their armies at our borders. And then these ones say that within so and so many years we'll cease to exist. And these, quite frankly, want to nuke us. And now this one says, we'll have big price to pay because he recognized our capital. But he has a deal of the century. But we might not like it. In short, Israel is always on the firing line, always called to compromise, always called to explain, validate, and shrink. And the question of our right to live in this land is never laid to rest, as if we just got here. So how apropos that the very first divinely appointed task of the nation, the day of our arrival, was to announce to all the world, for all the world to see in every language, that we are here on one account only, to observe Hashem's Torah. I mean, did you hear what we read? Did you hear this verse? You shall inscribe on them all the words of this Torah when you cross over, so that you may enter the land that Hashem your God gives you. What a verse. Makes it sound like our entrance into the land that Hashem gives us is dependent upon this inscription? Upon the inscription or upon what the inscription says? This is a declaration of this land as being a bond between God and his people. The ultimate statement of Israel's connection to her land. Thus, the entire Torah portion is connected. These stones are not markers or a billboard, but Hashem's answer to the alleged dilemma, to the audacious, brazen, constant questioning of our right to this land. It is our observance of the Torah which entitles us to this land. We receive it in the merit of the Torah and the observance of its commandments, none other. When you cross, you shall write upon them all the words of this Torah, in order that you may come to the land which Hashem your God is giving you, a land flowing with milk and honey, as Hashem your God, the God of your forefathers, has spoken to you. Written in every language, the message is broadcast to the entire world. We are servants of Hashem in this land. This is our answer, first and foremost, to ourselves, please, and then to every detractor, and a proclamation to the entire world that our national identity and presence in this land is only established through our commitment to the Torah. And that curses tell us the natural progression of what happens when we ignore our destiny. It's only the Torah that makes Israel, in the words of the verse, supreme, a treasure, renowned, and splendor. And as we experienced constant attempts to disconnect us from this land and delegitimize our very existence, we really need to look back upon those stones and reaffirm our commitment. This and this alone is the secret to our connection to this land, and the key to the divine promises of dwelling upon our land in peace, prosperity, and security. The elements of the Torah portion are one. The choice is really ours. We can be in denial, or we can recognize the opportunity, the gift outright, as the community of Israel come home. And we can do this in joy, and we can realize the privilege of receiving this land that God has given us. And like the first fruits, we can bring everything in joy back to Him, full circle, in full acknowledgement and recognition of what He has done and continues to do for His people in the land of Israel.